Greetings! This video guides users how to install Ubuntu 20.04 in VirtualBox, hosted on a Windows operating system. My channel focuses mainly on development projects, and whenever possible, I do the development of those projects within Ubuntu. So I wanted to make sure the audience of this channel knows how to set up Ubuntu and understands my workflow. This video shows you how to get the initial starting place that I'll use when starting any of my development projects. Non-developers can also learn from this video, but they are not really my target audience. I have 3 other optional videos that better explain why I recommend Linux, why Ubuntu specifically, and why I suggest using VirtualBox. I'll link those videos in the description. In short, I suggest Linux because it's free, open source, and fast, especially on bare metal. I suggest Ubuntu because the barrier to entry is low, and yet it's still used by plenty of power users. In addition, when doing web development, I can easily make sure my development environment closely matches my production environment. Finally, I recommend VirtualBox as a great way to learn Linux before installing it on bare metal, and even if I'm using Linux as my host OS, I often run a virtualized instance of it for testing and development anyway. It means I can very quickly start each new project with a fresh OS. I find this helpful if I need to use different databases for different projects, or try out software I've never used before. It's helpful to viewers of this channel because they don't have to make any assumptions about my setup. They have a chance to see the setup take place. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is open up our favorite web browser and head on over to ubuntu.com. And as you can see, well, accept the cookies and all that, we're going to go over to the download link, and I'm choosing Ubuntu 20.04 Desktop LTS, and it's just automatically going to start downloading. Go ahead and save the file. And while that's going, I'm also going to go ahead and install VirtualBox. So first, let's go over to VirtualBox website at www.virtualbox.org. We'll go ahead and click that download link. I'm going to choose Windows Hosts and save that file. Now I have a counter in the bottom right corner so you can get an idea of how long this whole thing takes, but I am going to go ahead and speed up this part of the video. Okay, so with VirtualBox downloaded, let's go ahead and install it. I'm just going to accept the defaults. I don't want these settings. You might. Okay, and I'm not going to go ahead and start it just yet. I'm going to wait for Ubuntu to finish downloading. Okay, so Ubuntu is about to be finished downloading. Let's go ahead and talk about verifying the download. If all you're trying to confirm is that no bits were flipped during the download itself, this step is unnecessary because the installation will do its own test. However, if you're worried about maybe someone having hacked the ISO, but of course at this point they could have also hacked this part, but you can check your download to make sure that the checksums match. These instructions actually only go over how to do this if you're running Linux. But in just a second here, I'll go ahead and show you how to do that if you're running Windows like I am. To be honest, I usually skip this step entirely, but for the sake of completeness, I'll go ahead and show it. So what we want to do is open up the Windows PowerShell. You can click on your little start, type in PowerShell, that brings this up. We're going to cd into our downloads directory, which is where that file ended up. And then we're going to run this git file hash. I just did a tab key to complete that. We're going to run this command on that downloaded file, and I'm putting it in parentheses because then we're going to run the hash function on that and test its equality to that value given on the website. And this command will take a few seconds to run, so I'll speed it up and see you there. And it failed. Oh, you know what? I ran it as a SHA-1 hash, but look, it's a SHA-256 hash. So I'm going to do that again as a SHA-256, and this time it should work. I'll see you there. And there we go, checksums match. So we know there were no errors in that download. And before moving on, let's take a moment to talk about system requirements. Now, as you can see here, it's talking about 2 GHz dual-core processor or better, 4 GB RAM, 25 GB hard drive space. I'm actually going to not have that much hard drive space, but I'm going to make sure the rest at least matches that. I'll go over the hard drive thing in a bit. Also, quickly, let's talk about alternate downloads. You could potentially be doing your peers a favor by downloading a torrent of the file and continually sharing it, whether that's the 20.10 release or the 20.04 release. And if you don't quite understand the difference between the releases, I do talk about that in my What is Ubuntu video linked down below. Okay, so now that we have Oracle VirtualBox installed and the Ubuntu ISO downloaded and verified, let's go ahead and start up Oracle VirtualBox. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this and create a new machine. I'm going to call this Ubuntu Dev Base. That is my naming convention. I usually do Ubuntu Dev to make sure it's denoted as a development machine. And I'm calling it base because I'm actually going to use this to clone new machines off of. Now remember that 4 gig memory requirement. I'm going to go ahead and set this to say 4 gigs now and leave that as a default. And I'm also going to leave this default because I'm actually going to end up doing a minimal install, which does not require that 25 gigs they were talking about. Now, one more thing. I'm going to go to Settings, System, Processor, and increase that to 2 processors. Now, I could have gone up to 4 very easily. You see that's still in the green, but I didn't. And then here, I'm going to go ahead and create a shared folder now. It's not going to work yet, but I'm going to go ahead and create it now. Now with that done, I'm going to go ahead and click Start. We'll give this a moment, and it is going to ask me to point it towards an ISO. And I'm just going to point it towards the ISO that we downloaded. And here we go. Now, we can talk more about these messages later. I'm just going to click this button to make them go away for now. Okay, so this is the Ubuntu startup screen for it's going to look very similar whenever you install a fresh install as well. This is about to test the media. Like I said before, that test was completely unnecessary, that SHA-256 check, because this is going to do all of that check again for us. It's just quickly going to make sure that there are no errors in this download. And indeed, no errors found. Okay, so let's give it a little bit of time, and it's going to go ahead and bring up the installation screen for us. And here we are. You know, if you click Try Ubuntu, you can actually try out the operating system without doing an install. But I'm going to go ahead and choose Install. I'm choosing these default settings here. And here I'm going to choose minimal installation, download those updates. I'm not going to do these third-party. I would actually do a normal installation and choose third-party if I were installing this as a production environment. But since I'm only doing a development environment, these are my choices. And let's give this a moment. It's about to ask us about the hard disk. And for this, just erase disk and install Ubuntu. Note this is not going to erase your production drive. This is all in the virtual setting within Oracle VirtualBox. Okay, I'm going to choose Central Time Zone here and continue. And here I just give my development machines the name dev and the password dev to make it real easy. If you're installing this for your own personal use outside of development virtualized setting, definitely choose something better. Choose a good password and all that. Okay, now this is all going to take a while. I'm going to speed it up and see you on the other side. And here we go. It's finished. So I'm going to go ahead and click Restart Now. And we're back. We're ready to log in for the first time. Now, I don't want to connect any accounts. I'm going to skip this. Next. For development, I don't ever send this information. Keep location services off. And this is advertising the Ubuntu store. I'm just going to click Done. I don't need this help. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the terminal. And I am also going to add that as a favorite because I'm going to go to the terminal quite often. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is run sudo apt update. I'm going to enter my password dev. Now what this is going to do is figure out any packages that are actually eligible to be upgraded. Sudo apt upgrade by itself doesn't really do anything. First you have to update it so it knows what it can upgrade. So this is just to make sure that everything is up to date before moving on to the next step. Now that it's run update, let's go ahead and run our sudo apt upgrade. It's prompting us. We're just going to click yes and press yes. And since this is a fresh install, it's actually found a lot of things to upgrade. So I'll meet you on the other side. I'm going to speed this part of the video up. And that's done. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this shell. And often I'd go ahead and do a reboot right here. I just go up here, power off, and reboot. But I'm actually not going to. I'm going to open up another shell because we're just going to get started on the next step right away. Sudo apt install build-essential. So what this is going to do is install a lot of tools that are necessary for building in an Ubuntu environment. And this step is also necessary for when we need to compile new kernel modules for the Ubuntu guest editions, which is what we're going to do next. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get there. Okay, so with that done, I'm just going to show you real quick that here's where the shared folder would show up if that were currently working. Remember we set up that shared folder earlier? And in addition, none of these screen sizes are available to us. And that's what the guest editions is going to allow us to correct. So I'm going to choose Insert Guest Edition CD, and then click Run, enter my password, and because we installed the build essential, it's going to go ahead and let it build these additional kernel modules. And so this will take a little bit of time. I'll meet you on the other side. And it's done. Now, none of that's going to take place until we go ahead and do a restart. And in just a second, push return to close this window. I am going to do one more thing, which is add our user to a group called VBoxSF. That will let us actually access a shared folder without having to enter in our password. Okay, so that would only take place after a reboot. Now I can either reboot by going up to the top right and choosing it, or actually the upgrader has decided it's time to do the reboot anyway, so it's prompting me. I'm just going to go ahead and click restart. And here we are after a reboot. Now I'm going to go ahead and unmount that guest edition CD and just show you that now I can change the resolution. And with that in mind, I'm actually going to change my Windows resolution so that then the Ubuntu VirtualBox will take up a bigger part of the screen. I'll be right back. And we're back. So now I'm going to go ahead and show you that I can increase this to 1280 by 720, which is what's best for a lot of these coding videos. It gives you plenty of real estate, but nothing becomes so small that you can't see it on your phone if you're watching that way. Now, I was just showing you that that shared folder is there now. That's another thing that happened because of installing the VirtualBox guest editions. And now I can go ahead and close out of this and show you how to clone the machine that you just created. So I'm going to right-click that machine I created and choose Clone. And it's going to... Now I'm going to call this Ubuntu Dev Project 1. You just insert the name of the project here. That's what I would do. We're going to make it a full clone and give this some time. It'll go ahead and copy. The difference between a full clone and a linked clone is the full clone will fully duplicate the virtual hard drive. The linked clone will point both boxes at the same hard drive. There might be other differences, but that's the main one I know. Okay, so with that done, what I'm actually going to do is update the path to that shared folder. Depending on exactly what I'm doing, what I usually like to do is have a different shared folder for each actual machine, virtual machine. But every now and then it's advantageous to have a folder that's actually shared between multiple machines. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and update that shared folder so that this one is unique to this machine. And now, one more thing that I often go ahead and do with that base is go ahead and just mark the hard drive, the virtual hard drive for it, as read-only. That way I don't accidentally go starting that machine and then installing a whole bunch of stuff that I really don't want on my base. Because again, this base is really just there for cloning into new machines. Every now and then I'll go start up this machine, do another sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade, install all the updates that have come out since I made that base. But other than that, I just leave it there. I don't touch it. And so now if I go ahead and start up my Project 1 machine, it is exactly where I want it to be to start out a new development project. I have no IDEs installed. I have no text editors installed beyond like what comes pre-installed. I have no tools installed. but I'm going to choose those per project. And so that's exactly how I want it to be. So anyway, that is my workflow for how I install Ubuntu in a virtual setting. And this is exactly the base machine that I want for any of my projects. So if you follow this, then you'll be set to start out any of my projects with me. Thanks for watching.